Ready.
All right, so let's bring in Pate, criminal defense and constitutional attorney. We've got CNN senior media correspondent Brian Stelter. Paige, I want to start with you. Let's first listen to what Guzman's lawyer is saying about the potential extradition to the U.S.
Mr. Guzman Loera should not have been extradited to the United States or any other country. What's the reason? Because Mexico has just laws that are detailed in the General Constitution of the Republic.
All right, so Paige, let's start there. The attorney has filed motions to block extradition. What are potentially the credible reasons, the credible defense against extradition?
Well, under most extradition treaties, and the one with Mexico is certainly a good example, there are not really many defenses to an extradition request. The government does have to show that there is sufficient evidence for the charges, and we know in the United States that Mr. Guzman has been indicted in about 7 different federal cases, and all of that information has been sent to the Mexican Attorney General. They've apparently reviewed it and found it to be sufficient. So they will file papers in court to issue additional provisional arrest warrants to go out and get him. Of course, they now have him, but they need to hold him under these warrants while the extradition process continues. Now, I do expect his defense lawyers to raise several other objections. They can raise an objection as to perhaps double jeopardy. Hey, we've already convicted him in Mexico for drug crimes. Why should we send him to the United States for other drug crime trials? They can also raise more technical defenses or procedural defenses by way of injunction, and they've done that in the past. So I do expect this process to take some time. If we look to similar cases, one of his associates was eventually extradited to the United States, but it took about a year to do that, and that case was nowhere near as high profile as this one.
Brian, let's talk about this Sean Penn interview being published in Rolling Stone. I mean, this would not be the first time. It certainly isn't the first that a fugitive has been interviewed for publication or for television, but if you read the comments on RollingStone.com, a lot of the readers are disappointed in both Rolling Stone and Sean Penn for conducting this interview.
Yes, and I think we can add to that list the Mexican government, how embarrassing it is for the Mexican government who was pursuing this fugitive to have been scooped by Sean Penn. Now, on the other hand, it's possible that Sean Penn's movements were tracked and that this interview actually helped the authorities track down the fugitive. So there's an interesting issue here about whether Sean Penn helped or maybe even hindered the investigation. You got to ask yourself, if you're Sean Penn, do you have an obligation after the interview to maybe report on it, to tell, not to write about it, but to tell the government about it, to inform the authorities? And then there's also this, Victor, this really strange paragraph at the beginning of the story. He reveals that he gave the fugitive approval, source approval, the opportunity to read the story ahead of time and then say okay. What was going to happen here? Basically, El Chapo was playing editor, and that's a very unusual situation.
Paige, there's also this that's in this Rolling Stone write-up, the disclosure that some names had to be changed, locations not named. I mean, can the magazine be forced to reveal any of that to bring other members of this cartel to justice?
Oh, absolutely. If the magazine has information about other fugitives or other members of this organization, there are ways for the government to get access to that information in Mexico or in the United States. So although you normally think, well, you know, as a media source, our sources are privileged, they're confidential, there are ways to get around that in a case involving a fugitive.
Brian, we know this interview happened in October, and it was in October that Mexican officials started searching this area specifically for Guzman. Do we know if this was the interview or the communications with actors and producers that we heard about yesterday that led to this on Friday?
Yeah, you know, we don't know for sure, but it does all seem to line up. The timing does seem to line up. In fact, some of the follow-up questions from Sean Penn were communicated through that video we saw and not through a face-to-face interview because he maybe had to move locations after that attempted raid. So you do wonder about that. You know, Sean Penn also says in his article that he was confident, he didn't say why, but he was sure that the Mexican and American governments were tracking the kind of entourage's movements. Sean Penn Penn was traveling with a number of other people. So there's that possibility of this actually helping find this drug lord. But it's an awfully strange number of circumstances, a huge coup for Rolling Stone, but also a huge controversy with lots of other journalists saying they never would have agreed to these kind of conditions. The bottom line, though, is that Sean Penn's not normally a journalist. He's a celebrity, and it was partly his celebrity status that probably was able to get him to get into this jungle and to be able to see one of the most wanted men in the world.
I expect after all this controversy, we'll hear more from Sean Penn or Rolling Stone pretty soon. Brian Stelter, Pate, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.